So, what happens when heavenly perfection just slams right into human failure? Today, we are diving into one of the most raw and honestly one of the most relatable miracles in the Gospels. It's this incredible story that kicks off on a mountaintop of pure divine glory and then just plunges right into a valley of desperation. And in doing so, it shows us what faith really looks like, when we're at the absolute end of our rope.
All right, so our story begins with the ultimate scene change. I mean, you've got to picture this. Jesus, Peter, James, and John are literally walking down a mountain where they just saw a glimpse of heaven itself. Jesus transfigured, shining with divine glory. But the world they step back into, it's the complete opposite. It's messy, it's chaotic, it's a scene of total human conflict and failure. You can just feel the whiplash, right? Up there on the mountain, they saw heavenly reality. But down here in the valley, it's human reality in all its messy glory. Jesus' own disciples are backed into a corner. They're surrounded by this huge crowd, they're arguing with religious leaders, and they are completely powerless to solve the crisis that's unfolding right in front of them. And right at the heart of all this chaos is a man who has been pushed to his absolute limit. A father comes and kneels before Jesus, and it's not with some simple request. No, this is a desperate, last-ditch plea for his suffering son. The situation was just dire. The father explains that his son is tormented by a demon that steals his speech and throws him into these violent epileptic-like seizures. And horribly, it often tries to destroy him by throwing him into a fire or into water. And just to make everything worse, he'd already brought his son to Jesus' disciples, who failed publicly. They couldn't do anything. You can just imagine the hopelessness in the air. So this is the scene Jesus walks into. You've got this powerful demonic force that refuses to yield. His own followers are left powerless and frankly humiliated. And there's a father whose hope has been completely drained. This isn't just some medical emergency, it's a full-blown spiritual crisis. Jesus looks at the father and says that all things are possible for the one who believes. And the father's response? Wow. It is maybe one of the most honest and powerful prayers ever recorded. It just cuts right to the heart of what it means to be human and to have faith.
I believe, help my unbelief. Think about that. This isn't some bold declaration of perfect, unwavering faith. It's a gut-wrenching cry from somebody who wants to believe, but he's drowning in doubt and fear. He's basically holding out his fragile faith in one hand and his overwhelming doubt in the other and just offering both to Jesus. And it's that raw honesty that Jesus responds to. It shows that real faith isn't some kind of transaction, it's a relationship. And that relationship has room for our struggles. And just like that, in an instant, Jesus rebukes the demon, and the boy is healed. He's completely whole. The crisis is over. But for the disciples, well, the lesson is just getting started. They pulled Jesus aside later and they asked the question that is just burning in their minds. Why couldn't we drive it out? Jesus' answer gives us this famous mustard seed analogy. And look, he isn't scolding them for having small faith. He's making a totally different point. It's that the size of your faith doesn't matter nearly as much as the genuineness of it. Is it alive? Is it real? Because even if it's as tiny as one of those little seeds, that living trust is what plugs us into God's impossible power. The imagery here is just, it's everything, isn't it? A tiny, seemingly insignificant seed that has the potential to move a massive, unmovable mountain. It's a radical idea. It's saying that real power doesn't come from the quantity of our faith, but from the object of our faith. So let's get back to it. Why did they fail? Jesus gives a really direct two-part diagnosis. First, their faith just wasn't active in that moment. And second, they weren't relying on prayer. It seems like they were trying to operate on their own steam, maybe coasting on past successes. But this kind of stubborn spiritual opposition, Jesus explains, required a much deeper dependency on God, and that comes through prayer. And this brings us to the miracle's lasting significance. This whole event was a real-time lesson in spiritual authority and what it actually takes to operate in the power of the kingdom. It's not something that's just automatic. So what this story gives us is a really clear pattern for spiritual power. It starts with recognizing our own limits, just like the disciples were forced to. Then it moves to embracing honest faith. Yeah, even faith that's mixed with doubt, like the fathers. And finally, it's all sustained not by our own strength, but by a constant reliance on God through prayer. So when you boil it all down,
This miracle does three huge things. One, it shows Jesus' total and complete authority in the ongoing spiritual warfare. Two, it teaches a vital lesson that genuine faith and prayer are absolutely non-negotiable for anyone who wants to see God's power at work. And three, beautifully, it shows God's immense compassion for people just like us, whose faith isn't always perfect, but is honestly reaching out for help.
And that leaves us with a question, a challenge, really. In a world that's full of problems that seem as immovable as mountains, both in our own lives and in the world at large, what would it look like to start with that tiny yet incredibly powerful mustard seed of faith? Thanks so much for exploring this with us.